So my third question is about the recent passing of the Bishop Tissier. What role would you say he played in the fight for tradition?
He played an important part. He made, in his life, he made several serious contributions to the Society of Pius X. I just wrote in a recent Eleison comments about him, and I quoted 3 serious contributions that he made to the society. And there are more than 3, but there are these 3 at least. And the first was that he and another young Frenchman were very early seminarians. I think the very first intake, which may have been in 1968 or 69, I'm not quite sure in my mind, 68 or 69, the Archbishop launched the seminary in, I think, 1968 in Fribourg, Switzerland. But at the end of that first year, so many seminarians, so many of the very first seminarians left, that the Archbishop very nearly gave up trying to build a seminary. But then there are 2 French seminarians of that very first year who persuaded him to continue. They persuaded him to keep trying, and sure enough, that I think was in the summer of 1969. Sure enough, in the autumn of 69, there was another good intake of seminarians, easily enough to persuade the Archbishop that he should continue, but he nearly gave up. He must have thought that it would be a waste of time and that there weren't going to be any serious number of seminarians. But in that autumn, there were a serious number again, and so the Archbishop continued. Now, he might not have continued if the young Frenchman, Bernard Tissier de Mallerais, and another young Frenchman, Paul Oulagnier, if the 2 of them hadn't persuaded him, he might have given up then and there. And if he had given up, what would have happened to tradition in the Church? It might almost have disappeared. As it was, the Archbishop continued, and I think the very next year, he moved from Fribourg to Écône because he found these buildings, friends of tradition, which was not even yet really a movement in the Church, not a self-conscious movement, but there were a group of 5 laymen, not the least laymen, who got together and bought the buildings of the chanoines of the canons of the St. Bernard Pass, the ones with the big floppy dogs with brandy under their neck, carrying brandy under their neck to foot passengers stranded in the snow, walking over the Alps to Italy or from Italy to Switzerland. The canons had these buildings which they no longer needed or used. Those terrible 1960s when the Church was really beginning to collapse. And so many buildings were coming free, and the canons no longer needed these buildings in the valley, the canton of the valley. And so he moved from Fribourg, because Fribourg had been a very good Dominican university. The Dominicans, of course, are famous for the true Dominicans are famous for their doctrine, going back to St. Thomas Aquinas. And they had a good university in Fribourg, which is why the Archbishop started in Fribourg, Switzerland, because he wanted his seminarians to be able to go to a good university. But by the end of the 1960s, the university was failing, like so many institutions of the church were failing, convents and monasteries and seminaries and universities. All of these Catholic institutions were going crazy with the false Catholicism being forced upon them by misguided popes and misguided cardinals and misguided bishops. And therefore, he gave up on Fribourg and he bought. No, he didn't. He was invited by these Swiss laymen in the canton of the Valais to make use of the building that they owned. And it's only after a certain time that he paid them back and bought from them, or they gave to him, I forget. They gave to him the property after a certain time so that he would be independent on his own. And he moved to Switzerland. And that's when the seminary, year after year, began to take off until 1974, when Rome began to close in on him and to try to make him shut down his seminary and to make him change from the old Mass to the new religion, because the old Mass is the heart of the old religion. The new Mass is at the heart of the new religion. And the old religion is centered on God. The new religion centers on man. And the Archbishop said that the new Mass is unacceptable. The new religion is unacceptable. I'm continuing with the old religion. And that's when Rome began to see what he was doing, and began to close in on him. In 1975, he had to face a kangaroo court of 3 cardinals in Rome. In 1976, when he insisted on ordaining a significant group of seminarians, that was 12 seminarians, that he ordained priests in the hot summer of 1976, when he clashed head-on with Rome. But the Archbishop stayed his course. He could see. He had a strong faith, and he was defending the faith. And his seminarians were becoming priests, and they would defend the faith that he defended, following his great example. And that was when Rome seriously condemned the society in the summer of 1976. That was Paul VI. But the Archbishop stayed on his course, and he preferred the faith to false obedience, the true faith to false obedience. To obey these authorities going so deeply and completely wrong on the faith, the very faith, the very Catholic faith was at stake. The church was being shaken to its foundations by modernism, by the idea of adapting God's church to man's desires. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. The church is for God to be able to save souls and bring them into his heaven, to be happy with him forever, to be blissfully happy with him forever. That's what the faith is all about, the salvation of souls. And here is modern Rome saying, no, we're going to save the modern world. We're going to save the devil's world. And the devil was inside the church, and the devil was wreaking havoc, causing havoc. Terribly serious, but Pope Paul VI couldn't understand. He did not understand. He was a liberal. He believed in the modern world. He believed in the church, but he also believed in the modern world, which is contradictory. You can't mix oil and water. You can put the two oil and water in the same bottle, the same quantities. You can shake the bottle furiously for 2 minutes. The oil and water will mix for 2 minutes, but the moment you stop shaking the bottle, they will separate again, because oil is lighter than water. Oil will not mix with water because it's much less heavy. Water is comparatively heavy. The two will not mix. You can artificially force them together for a little while, but very soon after you stop shaking, the oil and water will separate again. The modern world is based on godless principles: liberty, equality, fraternity, freedom, religious liberty, ecumenism. Is based on false principles, and the modern world is godless. The true Catholic religion is godly, and the two will not mix. But that's what Paul VI was trying to do, because he believed in both. He believed both in the godless world and in the godly religion. He didn't realize he was in contradiction. He thought he could mix the two, but he couldn't. He can't. There's no man on earth that can make our oil and water mix, unless he's got the help of a devil to keep them mixed. But by themselves, they separate. The modern world has chosen a godless path. It's turning away from God all the time, everywhere. It wants to live for the pleasures of man. It wants to live for pleasure and without the Ten Commandments. The modern world does not want God. That world cannot have Catholicism adapted to it, which was the basis of the Conciliar Revolution at Vatican II. And so the Conciliar Revolution of Vatican II is constantly failing. But the churchmen can't see it. They are blinded by the glamorous modern world. But they haven't got the faith. They're losing the faith, and they want to lose the faith. It's very strange, it's very serious, but that's just how it is. So what can you do? You go on fighting for the true faith, and you have to fight against the church authorities, at least for the time being, until it will become clear to everybody that the council was wrong, that it was trying to mix oil and water, and that it cannot be done. The modern world and the Catholic religion cannot be mixed. The true Catholic religion is bound to condemn the false modern world. The two cannot mix. But men dream of mixing it because they dream of having things their own way, of there being no Ten Commandments, of there being no God who commands them not to do certain things. So what can you do? You have to fight the good fight, as St. Paul says. I have fought the good fight. I have, how does he say it? I've kept the faith. I've fought the good fight, and the Lord God will reward me, and that's the truth. If we stick to the truth and live by the truth and obey the Ten Commandments, we will go to heaven and we'll be happy with God forever.